Kakadosh Boker or Daf Yomi Masechet Sanhedrin Daf Samechalef Amud Aleph 61a. We are going to start on the bottom of 60b, the Itmar. It was stated, a person is going to slaughter an animal in order to throw the blood to Avodat Kochavim, or Laktir Chelbal Avodat Kochavim, to bring a ketoret, right? To bring the incense for Avodat Kochavim. Rabbi Yochanan comes and he says it's asura ba'ana'ah. You're not allowed to have ana'ah with it. Reshakish Amar muteret. Reshakish says it's going to be permitted for hana'ah. Hanichal Rabbi Yochanan. I understand according to Shitat Rabbi Yochanan, right? Because it says Zoveach la'Elohim yachoram, which means that it's going to be extra, right? But according to the Shakish, that according to him there's no mekor, right? That they're going to say about avodah to avodah. So by ikra, you need a pasuk. Meaning, if you're going to come and you're just going to tell me, right, that it's making from one avodah to another avodah. Remember, one avodah to another avodah is all the other avodot of the Bet HaMikdash, which is talking about shechita, the haktara, right, all those other things. So therefore, he comes and he says, when it says zoveach la'elim yechoram, it's extra. But according to the Shakish, that he says that you do not learn, right, from one avodah to another avodah. So you need the zoveach la'elim yechoram to teach you that even if you're going to bring it as a sacrifice, it's going to be a problem. Yeah, 61. So Matki, Rav Papa comes and he asks the following question: Rabbi Yochanan, according to Shtat Rabbi Yochanan, lo ba'ekra, you're going to tell me that you do not need a pasuk from one avodah to another avodah? Ad kan lo ka'as Rabbi Yochanan ela behema. The only thing which is going to be prohibited is the behema for avodah zarah. Aval gavra lo bar katalahu. But he says the shochet is not chayav mita, because just because the fact that he thought of doing avodah zarah, that's not enough. So therefore, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, you're going to ask, right, that 1 second, Hashtachava comes to come and teach you on the klal kulo. Ve'ata kra lechiyu ve'gavra lektala, and the pasuk is coming to obligate you, right, in what? That the person is going to be a gavra ktala, which means, right, the shochet that he's going to be chayav mita when he's doing this service. Okay, so therefore it comes out, right, that this is the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, that it's not extra. Meaning, don't tell me that it's going to be extra, this pasuk of Zoveach la'elohim yachoram, because if not, he wouldn't have been chayav, right, mita. So Matkifla Ravacha bered Ravika asks Ravacha bered Ravika, according to the Shakish, mi ba'ekra, do you need a pasuk bichlal? He says, why? Ad kalu kashari reshakish ela behema. When does Reshakish come and he permit this? Only to do with a behema. Aval gavra bar katalahu. But the shochet is going to be chayav mita. He says here, according to him, it's exact opposite. That means, according to him, the person that does the shechita is going to be chayav mita. So he says, and you don't actually learn it from a pasuk, but it's a svara, because you cannot do the zrikat adam without shechita. So if you're going to, right, you cannot sprinkle the blood without doing shechita. So if you're going to do shechita to sprinkle the blood, right, you are doing it for avodah zarah. You're doing avodah zarah. So the fact that the behema is going to be permitted does not show you that the person that's doing the shechita is patur. What happens when you come and you bow down to a mountain? When you come and bow down to the mountain is permitted. The person bowing down is going to be chayav mita, but the mountain is permitted. The mutar ve'ovda b'sayif. The mountain never becomes prohibited. You remember we already learned this. So if a person comes and bows down to a mountain, it doesn't mean now that the mountain becomes prohibited bana, right? Why? Because it's mechubar lakarka and therefore it doesn't work. But the person serving still is chayav mita. So for you do find certain occasions where the server, the one that's serving avodah zarah, is chayav mita, and the thing which is being served is going to be permitted. So to hear, the animal is permitted, but that's not a proof that the person serving is patur. Really, be'emet he's chayav. Da mutar ve'ovda b'sayif. So he says, right? So according to this, it comes out, right? Just like the question of Rav bar Hanan, right? We know it's actually a svara. The pasuk is actually extra, which is coming to come out to teach on the klal and not on the one which is bowing down to the avodah zarah. Okay? So now we go back to the original concept. Amar le Ravacha midifti le Ravina. Lemad kama le Rav Hanan la Abaye. That which Rav bar Hanan comes and he tells Abaye, Ema yatsa ishtachava lelamed al klal kulo. You remember we said that why is it that it specifically took out ishtachava, that if you're going to bow down to avodah zarah, why do we take that out, right, on all the other services to the avodah zarah? So he says, right, because on everything else you're going to be chayav, right, if you're giving it the honor, even if it's not the derech avodah bekach. So he says, if so, Hapasuk ev echa yavdu hagoyim ha'ele et Elohem. How are these goyim going to come and serve their gods? Right, which is the mashmaut that they're not going to be chayav, right, on only avodah kedarka, which means avodah like the normal way, right? But avodah shelo kedarka, he says lemiutemai. What is that coming to come and to exclude, right? So he says, what is it coming to exclude, right? Which avodah is shelo kedarka that the Torah is coming to exclude? Which one is it? V'chiteiman. If you're going to tell me lemiute, it's coming to exclude hapoer atzmo lazovchim, right? It's coming that somebody is going to come and he's going to do his necessities, right? On the zovchim, on, right? Just like the avodah and bizvicha. So he says you can't say that. Why? Right? He says mishtachava nafka. Right? This we learn from mishtachava, which is teaching us that you're not chayav unless you do a derech kavod. Meaning, when you come and you defecate, which means that you do your necessities on a avodah zarah, that's not kavod. It's not normal. So therefore, since it's not kavod, you're not going to be chayav. You're only chayav when you do something, right? Derech kavod. Ma'ishtachava derech kavod, I've called derech kavod, which means just like when you bow down, this is called derech kavod. So too, right? Anything which is going to be derech kavod, that's when it's going to be that you're going to be chayav, even if it's not kedarka, even if it's not the normal way. So, for example, you came and you bowed down to an avodah zarah, and the avodah zarah, the way of doing it is bringing a korban, or sprinkling the blood, or putting wine libations, or whatever it is. The fact that you did something derech kavod, you're still chayav, even though it's not kederech avodata. So says the Gemara, ela lemiute. So what is it coming to exclude? Hapoer atzmo lemarkulis. If you're going to defecate yourself to markulis, what was the way of markulis? No, the stones. Yeah, the stones was markulis. So he says, hapoer atzmo lemarkulis. Salka daita chamina. I would have thought to say, hoil vavodato bizayon. He says, 1 second. There were two of them that was bizayon. Bal peor, that you do the necessities, and markulis, you throw a stone. So I would have thought that since anyway, the way of the service is derech bizayon, so that meaning it's a disgraceful way. So therefore, you would be chayav if you're defecating to markulis, or you would be chayav if you're going to throw a stone to bal peor, because anyway, it's a derech bizayon with these avodah zaras. So he says, af kol bizayon. Kamashvaran comes to teach you when it says that it has to be derech bizayon shelo kedarka is patur, even though that's derech bizayon. Meaning, even though these avodah zaras, the norm is derech bizayon, but there's a special norm. And since that special norm is specifically this type, any other type which is going to be a bizayon, it's on. So for example, somebody's going to come and they're going to defecate on markulis. Sorry. It's derech bizayon, doesn't matter, but it's not normal. Meaning the normal is only throwing the stones. So that's what it is. And the same would be the vice versa or any other way. Ella, but rather, hadamar bilazar, that which Rabbi Lazar says. Minayin lezoveach be'ema lemarkulis. How do you know that if you bring a sacrifice of an animal, right? Because again, this is a kavod. You're bringing sacrifices for markulis, that you're going to be chayav. Remember, how do you serve markulis? Throwing stones. You come and you brought a korban. You bring an animal. How do you know you're going to be chayav? Shneimar, but says the pasuk, ve'lo yizbechu od et zivchehem laseirim. What does that mean? You're not going to bring any other types of korbanot for the seirim. Here we're talking about the shedim for avodah zarah. Im eno inyan lekedarka. Now, if you don't need it for kedarka, because we already learned dichtiv echa yavdu et Elohem, so teneu inyan l'shelo kedarka. So therefore, this is going to be now for shelo kedarka. Meaning, if I already know that it's kedarka, you're going to be chayav in such a scenario. So therefore, if I'm bringing you another pasuk, and I'm telling you that you're going to be chayav on zebicha, obviously we're talking about that it's not for kedarka. So therefore, you have to put it shelo kedarka. So it comes out that even on shelo kedarka, you're going to be chayav when you're bringing a korban. So says the Gemara, 1 second. I thought I learned that from mishtachava. He says shelo kedarka, mishtachava nafka. He says, I thought that I learned that from mishtachava. Right? He says, so why do I need then an extra pasuk for zevicha? We have 2 psukim for zevicha, right? We had the pasuk of velo yizbechu od et zivchem laseidim, and we had the pasuk echa yavdu hagoyim ha'ele et Elohem. How are they going to come and serve their gods? So now we said that if you do not need it for kedarka, but you're going to be chayav, so you're going to put it shelo kedarka. He says, but I thought that we learned it from ishtachava, because ishtachava was part of the serving. How do you serve an idol? You bow down to it. That's the normal way of serving an idol, right? So now, if right now it took it out, So it's extra. So it's coming to teach you that even shelo kedarka. So he comes and he says, Hatam bezoveach lachis. There, we're talking about that you were zoveach, and it was shelo kedarka, but you were doing it leachis et Hashem. You're not doing it to accept upon yourself the Eloha as a God. Meaning, if you're going to come and you're going to serve the Avodah Zarah, so even if it's going to be serving it in a not normal way, but you're doing it derech kavod, you're going to be chayav. Right? Why? Because you're serving the Avodah Zarah. It's true, its designated service is A, but the fact that you're giving it a kavod, which is going to be B, C, D, E, whichever one it is, but you're also going to be chayav, because that is derech kavod. But what happens right now, if we're talking about, right, if we're talking about that you're not doing it derech kavod for the Avodah Zarah, because you don't care about the Avodah Zarah. You're doing it lachis et Hashem. And what's the proof? You're not doing the normal way of serving the Avodah Zarah. You're coming and you're taking an Avodah Zarah that its normal way is whatever it is. Let's say even bowing down. And then what do? You come and you bring a korban. Now, if you were doing a derech kavod and you want to serve the Avodah Zarah, so you're going to be chayav. Because at the end of the day, it's derech kavod, and you're doing it for Avodah Zarah. So you're not doing it for it. You're doing lachis. So since lachis means you're doing it to anger Hashem. Meaning, if you ask the guy, are you accepting upon yourself this God? No. So what are you doing? No, I want to make Hashem angry. Certain times, people, they're not doing something for the act. They're just doing it to get somebody angry, right? That's called lachis, right? So many times we find this in halakha that, for example, there's going to be a difference between that when a person does an avirah lachis or he's doing it, right, leteavon. So I'll give you the example. Let's say, for example, a person comes, right, and they're eating unkosher. You ask him, why are you eating unkosher? He says, because I love cheeseburgers. So now, when he comes and he tells you, I'm loving cheeseburgers, that's not lachis et Hashem. He loves himself. He has a te'avon. He's got some appetite and lust and enjoyment. So he's just doing it because he... Now, if you come and you tell him, why are you eating the cheeseburger? He says, because Hashem told me not to. He doesn't say that he loves it. He's doing it to spite. He's doing it to come to go again. That's called lachis, anger, kas. He's doing it to make somebody else angry. Who's he make? Obviously, it's Hashem. So therefore, in such a case where a person is coming and doing a lachis, so therefore he comes and he says, that's the case where we just said that he's going to be asur to do with zoveach. Meaning, if you're doing it lo lachis, but rather to serve the Avodah Zarah, there I learn it from ishtachava. But if he's learning it from where? From lachis, there you need the extra pasuk of zoveach, right? Right? Because there it's not doing it as a regular sacrifice to accept upon himself as God. He's doing it le hachis. That is, right, the other one. What did you want? Rav Hamnuna, this is a new topic now. Rav Hamnuna comes and he says as follows: Irkesulei tore. Remember, irkas means to lose. That's why a ketubah, the irkesa means a ketubah that was lost, right? So irkesulei tore. So his shvarim, right? They got lost. Yeah. So he comes out and he starts looking for his ox, right? So he says pagabe Rabba. So he sees Rabba. Right? And Ramaleh matniyata adade. So he asks a stira between two different mishnayot. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Oved avodah kochavim. If somebody is going to Oved avodah kochavim, he gets chayav skila. Oved in Omer lo. Meaning only if he actually does it. Before he actually does avodah zarah. But what if he says he's going to? So obviously not. But we learned in our Mishnah, Haomer evod, or elech ve'evod, or nelech ve'navod, he's already chayav skila. Meaning just on the saying that we're going to go and we're going to serve, he's already chayav. So Rav Hamnuna comes and he says, Elmaleh Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Hamnuna comes and he tells Rabba, right? Beomer enni mekablo alai ela ba'avodah. The Mishnah is talking about that he's not accepting himself, the God, only with avodah. Meaning until he doesn't do the avodah, he's going to be patur. The other Mishnah, just the fact that you said, I'm going to go serve, minastam, you already accepted upon himself as a God. So once you accept the Elil as a God, now you're chayav. But if you come and you say that you're only accepting it when you serve the God, so only when you serve the God are you going to be chayav. Rav Yosef comes and he answered it differently. Tanae shakalt me'alma, right? He says, what? Did you take the Tanaim stam, right? That you're coming and you're saying the difference between them, the two different Mishnayot? Tanai. It's a machlok Tanaim. Meaning you came and you wanted to say that there's a difference between the two Mishnayot. What was the case? Whether you said that you're accepting it only through Avodah, or just stam, you accepted it as a God. So he says, it's a machlok Tanaim. The Tanya was learned to the right, Omer bo v'ivduni. He says, what happens if right now you come and you make yourself into an Avodah Zarah? And you make other people come and serve you. Rabbi Meir says you're going to be chayav, right? Sekila, just like a mesit. Rabbi Yehuda, remember, mesit is that you're causing somebody else to do avodah zarah. Mediach is from ila nidachat, is that you're causing an entire city to do avodah zarah. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda poter. Rabbi Yehuda comes and he says you're going to be patur. So says the Gemara. Let's explain the machloket. Hechal de palchu. If they came and they actually did serve him, everyone agrees. You're not allowed to make a pesel. We just read it in this week's parasha, right? Parashat Yitro, the Ten Commandments. So when is a machloket? Bedibura be'alma. Stam dibur. Stam dibur means that they didn't get to maaseh. So Rabbi Meir coming, which means that they didn't get to an action. He was just trying to convince them, bow down to him, but nothing actually happened. So Rabbi Meir savar dibura miltai. Rabbi Meir holds that dibur is enough, and therefore the mesit is going to be chayav. Rabbi Yehuda savar dibura miltai, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, stam dibur is nothing. Meaning you convinced somebody to bow down to you, right? And the guy was even fool enough to even believe, but he didn't actually do it. So therefore it's nothing. So if you're not going to be chayav mita, hadar amar Rav Yosef. So then Rav Yosef came and he retracted, and he says, "Lav milta yideamne." Right? What I said is not correct. Why? Because remember, beforehand, he comes and he says like this. He says, "Afilu Rabbi Yehuda," even according to Rabbi Yehuda, bedibura nami michayav, you are going to be chayav on dibur. The Tanya was learned to the right that Rabbi Yehuda says, "Olam eno chayav at shiomar." Here it says mefurash, the fact that you say that you're going to serve, or that I'm going to serve, or we're going to go and serve, so that in it itself is already chayav. The fact that you say we're going to serve avodah zarah. So then they might come people guess, what is machlok them between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? Because Rabbi Meir says you're going to be chayav mitzad mesit, and Rabbi Yehuda says you're going to be patur. So they might come people guess, what is the machlok then? Bemesit leatzmo. What does that mean? If you're going to be mesit other people to bow down to himself, right? Why? And then they said yes. That is a machloket. Mor savar mesit latzmo shamile. People say that if they're going to listen to him. So therefore, when they come and they say yes, we're going to bow down to you, they really mean that. Umor savar Rabbi Yehuda holds mesit latzmo lo shamile. Nobody's going to listen. Meimar amri, because they're going to say to themselves, right? 61b. What's the difference between him and us? And the yes that they're saying is a joke. Meaning, many times people come and they try to convince you to do something. If they're going to convince you to do it on themselves, they're making a laughing stock out of themselves. It's a joke. So nobody's going to really listen. And when they say, yeah, it's just that, they're making a joke out of the guy, mockery out of the guy. However, though, if it's going to be that it's somebody else, then they would listen. So that is the machloket. According to Rabbi Meir, they actually truthfully believe that they're going to come and they're going to bow down to him and they're going to serve him as a. So therefore, it's a mesit. He's going to be chayav. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't exist such a thing. They're going to be laughing at him. Umatniyata. Right now, there's no stira between the two mishnayot. Kam biyachid anisat, bekam berabim anisatim. There's a difference between the Yachid and the Rabbim. If it's going to be a Yachid, right? So then that's one Mishnah. It's going to be Rabbim, so it's a completely different thing, right? Rav Yosef comes and he says, Yachid lo mimlach, right? He's not going to change his mind. Vetau batre. And they're going to come and they're going to do the Avodah Zarah. Rabbim, when it's going to be a lot of people, mimleche, they could change their minds, velo tau batre, and therefore they're not going to go after the mesit. Right? This is a very famous comment that whenever there's going to be a multiple group of people, right, you remind each other of averot, or you remind each other of certain things, and therefore it could be that you'll change. Because just like when there's a group, meaning if you're by yourself, a person will make a mistake, and they'll continue going with that mistake until they're solve. Why? He thinks he's right, even though he's wrong, but he thinks he's right, and he'll continue going until Bemet he's wrong, right? And he doesn't care. He just go until against a brick wall. Doesn't matter. When you're with the Rabbim will come and they'll tell you, you're wrong. And therefore, no matter how much he thinks he's right, the Rabbim will come and will correct him. And then finally they say, you know what, okay, fine. And then they'll change your mind. So Amar of Yosef says of Yosef, Mena minallah. How do I know such a thing? That there's a difference between Yachiv and Rabbim. He says, it says by the Mesit, Lo tovel lo, velo tishma elav. They're not going to want, they're not going to listen to him. Ha ava v'shama, right? But if they do actually want, they're going to be chayav. So it's mashma that we're talking about the yachid, that if they do actually be'emet listen to this guy, he's going to be chayav, right? And therefore, that's the difference between yachid and rabim. If it's going to be rabim, it's going to be everybody. So therefore, they're going to change their minds. If it's going to be a yachid, he wouldn't change his mind. Okay? So now we're going to ask a question on this hanacha. One more time. We just placed hanacha that there's a difference between yachid and rabim. A yachid will make a mistake and he won't change his mind. He'll go until the end. And the rabim, many times they'll change their minds and they'll change him. Why? Because even though he thinks wrong, but they'll change him. So Abaye comes and he asks, Nishani ben Niset Rabim and Niset Yachid, is there a difference, Bemet, between a Rabim and a Yachid? But Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Ki Sidcha Achicha ben Imecha, Echad Yachid and Niset Echad Rabim Nisatim. Right? It's all the same. Right? He says, V'otzia Katub Yachid Miklal Rabim. So why did it take out the Yachid from the Rabim? Here it says Yasit, but it said your brother. Achicha ben Imecha, your brother from your mother. So why did it take out, right, the Yachid from the Rabim? Rabim Miklal Yachid. Right, Yachid. So he comes and he says this. He says, right, Yachid miklal rabim lachmin al gufo ulalkel al mamono. When the Braita is coming and teaching you that when you have a Yachid that was part of the rabim, it's going to be machmin on gufo, to be mechayev oto sekila ulakel al mamono, and you're going to be mekel on his money. You don't have to destroy the money. Remember that when we're talking about ila nidachat, we do the exact opposite. We're mekel on the body because we give them saif, we give them headache. And then we're more mahmid on their property, that we completely destroy their property. Here we're doing the exact opposite, that we're going to be mekel, right? We're going to be mahmid al gufo ve'mekel al mamono. Rabim, when we're talking about in Chein and Dachat, miklal yachid lakel al gufam ulachmil al mamonam. We did the exact opposite. We took out from the yachid because we were mekel on their bodies, which means that we were now giving them saif instead of sekila, and we're mahmid on mamonam. This is the only difference between yachid and rabim. Meaning only this, just the fact that when there's a Rabbim doing the Aveda, meaning when you have an entire, remember, it only has to be the majority of the city. That's why it's Rabbim. Rabbim is the majority, right? Rov. If you have the majority of the city doing Avodah Zarah, that's already Rov Eid. You come and you give them Saif, and you completely destroy the entire city. Right? You destroy all their Mamona. So he says, Behaminta hu deshani, right? Only in this thing is there going to be a difference between Yachid and Rabim, aval bechol mide ki adadininu. But to do with everything else, it's all the same. So therefore here, the question of Bai is, how could you come and you tell me that there's going to be a differentiation between Yachid and Rabim that are mesitim? Here you see there's no difference. The only difference is going to be in the punishment to do with, are you going to be machmir al gufam umekel mamonam, right? Or mekel al gufam v'machmir al mamonam. So therefore, Abaye comes and he says, you know what? I've got another answer. Ela amar Abaye, but rather Abaye comes and he says, kan beniset mipi atzmo, vekan beniset mipi acherim. He says here we're talking about when a person comes and he says, I'm going to serve Avodah Zarah, we're talking about niset mipi atzmo. What does it mean mipi atzmo? Right? There's nobody else doing it to him. It's he himself. Here it's other people, right, that are trying to do that. And then he says, okay, fine, you know what? I'm going to do it. So therefore, if he's doing it from himself, he'll change his mind. Because just like I changed my mind to serve Avodah Zarah, he could change his mind back to not serve Avodah Zarah. Mimlich. It's going to be achirim. Achirim, he gets drawn with the flow. He goes, you know how it is. You know, you go with the flow. You go with everybody's doing it. So I'm also doing it. You go with achirim. So therefore, it's much harder to turn back. Meaning, the other way around, it was much easier. Because if it's going to be a Rabim and Yachid, the Rabim could change their opinion, and then they're going to stop you from doing something. The same way, vice versa. You're going with the flow. You're going to do it. So Amar Abaye says, how do I know this? Tichtiv lo tove lo v'lo tishma elav ha'ava v'shama. You're going to be chayav. So here we talk about that. We're talking about it's going to be mipi acherim, right? So Rava comes and he says, this is now the another answer to the stira. We're only talking about other people. We're not talking about by yourself. We're not talking about a yachid. It's mipi acherim. Right here, they're coming and you're telling the Nesit that this is Avodah Zarah, this is the way that it eats, this is the way that it does this is the way that it does good, this is the way the Ra. Behind here, you didn't tell him anything. And therefore, you didn't mention anything. Right? So since you didn't mention how good that it is, so therefore you could retract. Right? Now, what's the difference between them, whether you come and you give all the shvachim of the Avodah Zarah, or you didn't give the shvachim? Right? That kilo, if you don't give the shvachim of the praises, right, of the Avodah Zarah, so kilo, you're going to retract. So Rava says, how do I know that? What's the difference between the ones which are close by or the ones which are further away? So he comes and he says like this. He says, from the closeness of the krovim, you know the tivutan of the rechokim. My lover, we're not talking about, which means usually the mesit is going to come and he's going to speak good about the avodah zarah. They have to sell you something. If they're not going to sell you something, why in the world are you going to serve it? So if they have to come, they have to tell you, by the way, this avodah zarah, they tell you all the miracles and all the thing, and this is all the, and look what happens. And so, my lover, we're not talking about now. Shmamina, we learn from here that that's exactly what's going on, right? That means there's a difference between whether he told them all the sipure safta, as they say, or he didn't tell them. He told them all the stories of the good things or not. Ravashi comes and he says, Seifa b'Yisrael mumar. The Seifa of the Mishnah is talking about Yisrael mumar. Now, if it's a Seifa of the Yisrael mumar and he accepts upon himself to serve, it's going to be a different story. He says, Ravina comes and says, those who have sukhanim, but you didn't actually need to come and to mention it, right? And again, obviously, that's a difference, okay? Kakadosh Itmar, right? The Gemara says Itmar. Samechala from Bet 62b Itmar. It was stated. Somebody's going to serve avodat kochavim, whether it's because of ahava or yirah of a human being, meaning nothing to do with the avodah zarah. It has to do with a human being, but there's going to be ahava or yirah of a human being, and not because he thinks that it's a god. So Abaye comes and he says that he's going to be chayav, and Rava comes and he says that he's going to be patur. So he says like this. Abaye says that he's going to be chayav. Why? He served avodah zarah. What do I care what the reasoning behind the serving of avodah zarah? He's going to be chayav. Rava comes and he says he's going to be patur. Why? If he accepted upon himself as a god, in yes, vilolo, and if not, not. What is a siman? Eved ishtachave lemashiach, right? Eved ishtachave lemashiach. So this is a siman, a mnemonic to remember what's going on. Remember, many times we have different simanim in order to remember what's going on. So Abaye comes and he says like this: Mena amina la. How do we know such a thing? The Tanambas we learned in the Mishnah. Oved oved kochavim echad oved. Right? It says that if somebody's going to oved avodah zarah, so he's chayav sekila. Echad oved. Now we have to ask 1 second. Right? What is the kavanah now? Echad haoved. We already said that's the one that brings the sacrifice, the one that brings the ketoret, the one that does the right, which is the incense, the one that's doing like the nesech. So my lover, we're not talking about echad haoved ma'avavira. Meaning, when it just says you're serving, I don't care the purpose of your serving. You can be the purpose of serving out of love, out of fear. Again, we're talking about love and fear, not of the God. We're talking about love and fear of the human being. The Rava Malecha, and Rava is going to tell you no. Just like Rabbi Yirmiyah is going to come and he's going to answer, right? Which is basically, as we already mentioned, right, that you're going to be serving the avodah zarah, which is darka bekach. So whether it's going to be darka or lo darka, you're going to be chayav sekila. Abaye comes and he says, how do I know these words? The Tanya was learned to the Braita, lo tishtachave lahem. What does it mean now, lahem? Say lo tishtachave. What does it mean? Lo tishtachave lahem. So he says over here, lahem, iyata mishtachave. Aval ata mishtachave ladam kamotcha. But you could bow down to a person like you. Yachol, what does that mean exactly? So he says, I would have thought to say that means basically, if it's going to be for a kavod or yirah, you're allowed to. So you could bow down to a person. Right? Many times you come there, you bow down. You're doing avodah zarah. No, you're not allowed to bow down to them. But you can bow down to a human being like you. So Yachol afilu ne'evad ke'aman. She says, what about if the person is being served like Haman Adasha? Haman was being served like an avodah zarah. So therefore, don't tell me now. So what? No, there's an isur to bow down to a Haman. If he's not an Haman, I could go to a king and I could do like this. I could bow. I could do whatever I want. There's no isur, right? But if it's going to be like a person that's ne'evad, then it's going to be a sud. Why velota of them? So says the Gemara, ve'hamam ni'ira v'ne'evad. She says, 1 second, but they were bowing down to Haman because of ira, not because he was ne'evad. They were afraid of him. You just told me before that if it's going to be out of afraid or out of love of the human being and not anything else, so it's going to be okay. Here he was being served out of fear. But Rava is going to explain to you, ki Haman velo ki Haman. Like Haman and not like Haman. What does that mean? Ki Haman diu gufei avodah kochavim. Like Haman, that he himself is going to be like avodah zarah. Velo ki Haman dilu Haman mira. Ve'hacha alav mira. But here it's not going to be for ira, but rather elahut. It's like a god. So therefore he's saying that you're not allowed to come and bow down if it's not from ahava v'ira. And Abaye says, how do we know this? He says, the time we learned to the Braita, Kohen Mashiach. When you have the concept of a Kohen Mashiach, remember Kohen Mashiach is a Kohen which is going to be anointed. right? Now this anointed, right, Kohen Mashiach, right, which is with Shemen HaMishcha, right? And we know that there's Kohen Gadol, which was again through Shemen HaMishcha, and then there's also he's going to bring a par Kohen Mashiach if he does a mistake. So he comes and he says, but if he wasn't anointed with Shemen HaMishcha, he doesn't have Kohen Mashiach, and therefore, right, it's like a Yachid Shechata. So he comes, that means there's going to be a difference in what happens if he made a mistake in a psak that he's giving to other people. That's the difference between Kohen Mashiach and not a Kohen, which is Mashiach. Mashiach does not mean that he's the Mashiach. It means that he's anointed. Limshoch, right? Limshoach, right? With somebody who's going to come and he's going to anoint with Shemen HaMishcha. So he says, Kohen HaMashiach, Bavodat Kochavim, Rabbi comes and he says, right? B'shigigat Maaseh. We're talking about Shigigat Maaseh. What does that mean? We're talking about, right, that a person came and he made a mistake, right? Even though there was no mistake in the hora'ah, but it was a mistake in the action. Chachamim say, Be'elem davar. What are we talking about? That it was Nelma Mimenu also the halacha, and therefore meaning that he forgot halacha. The Shavin, so now also Rabbi and the Chachamim, they both agree. Besida, right? When we're talking about right now on Shigigat Avodat Kochavim Besida ki Yachid, right? Just like a Yachid that does Avodah Zarah. V'shavin she'en mevi Hasham talui, which means like this. We know that there's going to be differences in what you bring, which type of a korban do you bring. So if we're here, when a person is going to come and they're going to make a mistake, right, to do with the Avodah Zarah, they have to bring a she-goat, right, which is going to be a Sida, just like a Yachid that does Avodah Zarah, right? So if you have a Yachid that comes and he does Avodah Zarah, he has to also bring, right, a Sida, which is a she-goat. So he says, and they both agree also, Rabbi and Chachamim, right? Because again, here the machloket of Rabbi and Chachamim is what was the case, right, on the korban to be mechayev this Kohen Mashiach. But they both agree that also he has to bring an Hasham Talui. What is Hasham Talui? Hasham Talui is not an Hasham Vadai. Remember that Hasham Talui, there's an Hasham, right, which is a guilt offering. An Hasham is a guilt offering, but there's a concept which is called Hasham Vadai, which means that for sure you did an Avirah. And then there's an Hasham Talui. Hasham Talui is on the Safek, right, on the Shigaga that you did when you're doing a mitzvah. Okay, so he comes and he says, the Hasham Talui is a korban that you bring on a Safek if you did, right, the shogeg on somebody that sinned. So he says, which for sure you're going to bring a korban chatat if you did it, for sure, right? And now here, we're not certain. So for example, a person comes and he ate, right, b'shogeg chelev, right? Chelev is the prohibited fats. Remember, there's shuman and there's chelev. Chelev is the prohibited fats. Shuman is the permitted fats. So he ate chelev. So in such a case where he ate chelev, he's going to be chayav chatat. Now, what happens if he had two pieces in front of him and he ate? Now, he doesn't know what did he eat. Did he eat chelev or did he eat shuman? He doesn't know. So he brings in a Hasham Talui. Why? We don't know. He doesn't know if he actually did the Avera or not. So it's Talui. It's dependent. So therefore, since it's dependent, he doesn't bring a Chatat that for sure he did the Avera b'shogeg. He's not sure. So he brings in a Hasham Talui. That's the concept of Hasham Talui. So says the Gemara, Hai shigigat ma'aseh davodat kochavim hechidami. What is the pshat? Rabbi said, we're talking about Kohen Mashiach that made an accident by avodat kochavim. What does Rabbi say? Shigigat ma'aseh. Meaning he made a mistake in the action. Chachamim said, no, it was Be'elem davar. He didn't know the halacha and therefore he made the mistake or whatever it is. Now the second one second. What is the concept that you did a shogeg by avodah zarah? What's the case? Hechidami. Ika savad, if you're going to tell me Bet HaKnessetu, he went inside a place, he thought it was a Bet HaKnesset. And then what does he do? He bows down. And he doesn't realize that inside of the Hechal, it wasn't a Bet HaKnesset. It was Be'emet avodah zarah. His lev is the Shamayim. His heart is to the Shamayim. So what do you want? Ela de Chazan Darta. But rather he saw a pesel of a king. Yeah, and then what happened? That they used to serve him. Right? Now, he didn't know that it was served. Vishtachavalo. So he bowed down to him. Meaning certain psalim, certain pesels, is just, I don't know what. You have, like it's a monument. Right? So this monument is a beautiful monument. I don't think they serve it as Avodah Zarah. It's a monument. You understand? So fine. Right? But we just know that what happened now in Syria. The first thing what they do, they took the pesel, right, of the, they come and they destroyed it. Now, we don't know if they served it. I don't think anybody served it. The thing was just like to show, I'm the king, you understand? So he's got a nice, huge, how do you call this, monument, right? This huge pesel, and this is what it is. But now, the guy didn't know that they served it. So he comes and he bows down to it. Now, 1 second, they used to serve it. So now, if they used to serve it, that's an avodah zarah. So therefore, he bowed down. He did it b'shogeg. He didn't know. He bowed down here. Keilu, I'm bowing down to the pesel of the king. But he didn't know that he used to serve it as a king. So he comes and he says, 1 second, if that's the case, If he accepted upon himself like a god, so then that's mezid. He did it purposely then. Why? Because that means it's like a good thing. Now, if it's not that he did accept it upon himself, so it's nothing. But rather, it's going to be avavira. And therefore, you see from here, right, that when a person knows that it's going to be a sur, right, to do avodah zarah b'shem avodah, and any type of avodah, but he made a mistake because he thought it was permitted mitzad ahava v'yira. Remember, mitzad ahava v'yira means he's either afraid or he loves. He wants to show his love to a person, but not because he thinks they're a god. So therefore, that was considered the helem davar, and therefore it's not going to be only shigad maseh. So since it was a mistake only in the action, and he was trying to, meaning he's right now with the king, or with the, let's say it was the pesel was the king's father. So he's with the king, so he wants to show his love to the king. So he bows down. Now, it was shigat maseh. Why? He didn't accept it upon himself as avodah zarah, but he bowed down on the maseh. There was a shigat maseh. So therefore, that was the machloke between Rabbi and Chachamim. Are you going to be chayav chatat in such a fashion where you're doing avodah zarah me'ava v'ira, right? He says, right, you're going to be chayav. Not like what we said before. We said before that if you do avodah zarah me'ava v'ira, you should be patur. Here we're saying it's much whether you're going to be chayav. Obviously, tomorrow we continue with the Gemara explaining yes or no.